You know, Claire, I used to ask Trump insiders when he would say things about Robert Mueller being, anti-Trump, or the Mueller investigators being angry Democrats, or attack Rod Rosenstein, if he really believed what he said, because it was apparent that there would come a point where his delusions or his lies or his fabrications really did threaten people's lives. And it's a point that my colleague Rachel Maddow has made night after night now. But whatever it is that makes him say on a call with governors, I haven't heard anything about testing in weeks, seems at this point to be a dangerous delusion or an intentional lie.
Well, I think we can assume the default that it's a lie, because he lies constantly to try to make himself look better in the moment without thinking about the consequences of that lie tomorrow, next week, next month, even next year. But I think we also ought to pause for a moment and recognize what leadership is at this moment. And what I'm really proud of is the leadership of governors who are in states that Trump carried. Mike DeWine is a good example. Ohio was a Trump state. Michigan is an example. Montana went for Donald Trump by double digits, and that governor is on the ballot in November. And he is in a call being polite but adamant about the facts in his state. That's called leadership. That's called courage. I mean, with all due respect to the leaders in very blue states that are calling out the president, that's politically in their interest also. I know they're not doing it for that reason, or for the governors like my governor in Missouri, who's refusing to issue a statewide order because he's trying to be Trumpian in the way he handles this, because this was a very big Trump state. But it's those governors who have been that bright light of, I'm looking after my state and not after my politics, that it would be nice if we could get the president to emulate that kind of leadership.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.